Tales of the South Pacific is a Pulitzer Prize-winning book, which is a collection of sequentially related short stories about World War II, written by James A.Michener in 1946 and published in 1947. The stories were based on observations and anecdotes he collected while stationed as a lieutenant commander in the U.S. Navy on the island of Espiritu Santo in the New Hebrides Islands. The book was adapted as a 1949 Broadway musical and as two films, released in 1958 and 2001. The stories take place in the environs of the Coral Sea in the Solomon Islands. Michener as narrator gives a first-person voice to several of the stories as an unnamed commander, performing duties similar to those he performed himself during World War II. The stories are interconnected by recurring characters and several loose plot lines. One plot line in particular is the preparation for and execution of a fictitious amphibious invasion, code-named Alligator. The focus of the stories is, however, the interactions between Americans and a variety of colonial, immigrant, and indigenous characters. The chronology of the stories begins with the building of an airfield on Norfolk Island before the Battle of the Coral Sea in 1942, and goes through the early 1944 invasion of one of Michener's fictional islands. Although the stories are primarily about the U.S. Navy, most of the action is shore-based, and none concerns ships larger than an LCI. Adaptations. Musical. The highly successful musical play South Pacific by Rodgers and Hammerstein, which opened on Broadway on April 7, 1949, was based on the stories in Tales of the South Pacific. In particular, the stories used were Faux Dollar, about Bloody Mary, Leanne, and Lieutenant Joe Cable, and Our Heroine, about Nellie Forbush and Emil de Beck. Characters from other stories, such as Bill Harbison, Bus Adams, and Luther Billis, play minor supporting roles. Some of the characters from the stories were merged and simplified to serve the format of the musical. For example, the Coast Watcher in the musical is an American Marine assisted by an expatriate French plantation owner. In Michener's short story, The Cave, the Coast Watcher is an English expatriate assisted by native islanders, and is a disembodied voice on a shortwave radio identifying himself only as the remittance man. He is never seen by the other characters in Michener's short story until a search and rescue party finds his head impaled on a stake. The character of Emil de Beck in Michener's short story has 8 mixed-race illegitimate daughters by 4 different women, none of whom he married. When he meets the nurse ensign Nellie Forbush in the musical, he has 2 legitimate mixed-race children by a Polynesian woman whom he had married and who had died. Films of the musical. The Rodgers and Hammerstein musical South Pacific was made into a feature film in 1958. It was adapted as a made-for-television film 2001. Television. American television producer Bob Mann wanted Michener to co-create a weekly television anthology series from Tales of the South Pacific, with Michener as narrator. Rodgers and Hammerstein, however, owned all dramatic rights to the novel and did not give up ownership. Michener did lend his name as the creator of a different and unrelated television series, Adventures in Paradise, in 1959. The series had nothing to do with World War II, but rather followed the fictional adventures of a current-day schooner sailing around the South Pacific.